What if I told you, the reason you feel stuck, tired, or invisible, isn't because life has been unfair, it's because you've been quietly undervaluing yourself for years, without even realizing it. You know, after 40, life has a way of slowing you down, not just physically, but emotionally. We carry decades of experiences, mistakes, and sacrifices. We've raised families, built careers, and fought through hardships, but somewhere along the way, we forget our own value. It's not that we stop caring about ourselves, it's that we get so used to giving, adjusting, and surviving, we don't notice how often we accept less than we deserve. Stoicism teaches that our worth is not set by others, but by how we live according to our values through wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance. Today, I want to walk you through 10 signs you might be undervaluing yourself, and how ancient Stoic wisdom can help you reclaim your worth quietly, humbly, but powerfully. 1. You stay silent when you should speak up. I used to think that silence was a sign of wisdom. That if I stayed quiet, kept my thoughts to myself, and worked hard, the right people would notice. I told myself, good work speaks for itself. But as the years passed, I realized something: silence doesn't always look like wisdom to others. Sometimes, it looks like agreement. And sometimes, it looks like you simply don't care. I remember a meeting at work, years ago. A decision was being made that I knew was wrong. Not just wrong for me, but wrong for the entire team. It would mean more work, more stress, and less pay. I sat there, feeling the weight of my thoughts pressing on my chest, but I stayed silent. I thought, it's not worth the trouble. Someone else will speak up. No one did. And in that silence, the decision went through. Months later, when the consequences became clear, people complained, but it was too late. And I realized I had been part of the problem, not because I agreed, but because I said nothing. The Stoics understood this danger. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it, if it is not true, do not say it." Notice he didn't say stay silent. He said, don't say what's false, but if something is true and right, it deserves to be spoken. When you undervalue yourself, it's easy to think your voice doesn't matter. You tell yourself, who am I to speak? What if I'm wrong? But here's the truth, your voice is not just for you, it's for the people who don't have the courage to use theirs. When you speak up, you're not just protecting your own interests, you're protecting the shared values of the group, the integrity of your relationships, and the quality of your own life. Think about how many times in your life you've bitten your tongue with your boss, your spouse, even your children because you didn't want to cause tension. Sometimes, yes, silence is wise. But when your silence allows harm, unfairness, or dishonesty to grow, it's not wisdom, it's avoidance. Speaking up doesn't mean shouting. It doesn't mean starting a fight. It can be as simple as saying, I see it differently, or I'm not comfortable with this decision. Even those few words can shift the energy in the room. They can open the door for others to join you. And they can remind you of your own strength. I know it's not easy. Especially after 40, many of us have been trained by decades of habits to keep the peace, to avoid rocking the boat, to believe that keeping quiet is somehow the mature thing to do. But the older I get, the more I see, the peace you keep by staying silent often comes at the cost of the peace you have with yourself. The next time you feel that tightness in your chest, that quiet voice inside saying, this isn't right, pause, and listen to it. Then find the simplest, calmest way to give it shape in words. You don't have to have the perfect speech prepared. You just have to let the truth have a voice, your voice. Because every time you speak with honesty and integrity, you reinforce your own worth. And when you value your own words, others will start to value them too. In the last lesson, we talked about recognizing the moments when life asks for courage. Speaking up is one of those moments. It's not about winning arguments, it's about honoring yourself. And as we move into the next lesson, you'll see how undervaluing yourself can also show up in more subtle ways, like the way we say sorry for things that aren't our fault at all. 2. You apologize for things that aren't your fault. In the last lesson, we talked about the cost of staying silent when you should speak up. But there's another quiet habit that can slowly erode your self-worth, one that seems harmless on the surface, but carries a deep message about how you see yourself. It's the habit of saying "I'm sorry" for things that aren't even your fault. I remember a moment years ago I bumped into a man in the grocery store. The thing is, he was the one who turned the corner too quickly. Still, without thinking, I blurted, "Oh, I'm sorry." He nodded, kept walking, and that was it. But as I left the store, I realized I had just apologized for existing in the same aisle as him. And that was not the first time. I apologized when someone else missed a deadline. I apologized when the weather ruined our plans. I even apologized when someone misunderstood me, as if their reaction was somehow my fault. Epictetus once said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." When you apologize for things beyond your control, you're reacting as if you are responsible for every inconvenience, every mistake, every ripple in the water, even when you didn't cause it. Over time, this habit sends a dangerous message to your own mind: I'm always at fault. I'm a burden. And the more you believe that, the easier it becomes for others to believe it too. Now, don't misunderstand, there is honor in taking responsibility when you truly are at fault. That's courage. That's integrity. But apologizing for the mere fact that you're human, for having needs, opinions, or simply for being in someone's way, that's not humility, it's self-erasure. Think about the times you've said sorry when you didn't need to. Maybe you asked a waiter for an extra napkin. Maybe you walked into a room where a conversation was already happening. Why did you feel the need to apologize? Often, it's because we fear being seen as inconvenient. We think our presence, our requests, our very existence should be as small and unnoticeable as possible. But here's what the Stoics would remind us: you have a right to take up space in this world. Your needs are not an imposition, they are part of living. And when you carry yourself as though you have no right to ask, you teach others to treat you the same way. The shift is simple, but powerful. Replace unnecessary apologies with gratitude. Instead of "I'm sorry for bothering you," try "Thank you for your time." Instead of "I'm sorry I'm late" when it was beyond your control, say "Thank you for waiting." Gratitude acknowledges the other person without diminishing yourself. When I started doing this, something changed. Not just in how others saw me, but in how I saw myself. I began to feel like an equal in every conversation, not someone constantly asking for permission to exist. And that's the heart of it. When you stop apologizing for things that aren't your fault, you begin to see your own worth more clearly. You stand a little taller. You speak with a little more confidence. And you realize, you were never the burden you thought you were. In the next lesson, we'll talk about another habit that quietly chips away at self-respect: the tendency to say yes when every part of you wants to say no, because sometimes, valuing yourself means having the courage to protect your time, your energy, and your peace. 3. You say yes when you want to say no. In the last lesson, we talked about how over-apologizing can quietly erase your sense of worth. But there's another habit just as silent, just as damaging, that often comes from the same place: the fear of being seen as difficult, unhelpful, or selfish. It's the habit of saying yes when every part of you wants to say no. I remember one Saturday morning. I had planned a rare day just for myself: a slow breakfast, a good book, maybe a walk by the lake. But then my phone rang. A friend needed help moving furniture. I hesitated. I was tired, my back had been aching all week, and honestly, I just didn't want to. But before my mind could even process the truth, my mouth said, "Sure, I'll be there in an hour." Why did I do that? Because deep down, I worried that saying no would make me a bad friend. Because I thought my worth was tied to how useful I was to others. Seneca once wrote, "He who is everywhere is nowhere." When you give your time and energy to everything and everyone without discrimination, there's nothing left for what truly matters to you. Saying yes when you want to say no is more than just a scheduling problem, it's a self-respect problem. It's telling yourself, my needs matter less. And over time, this message settles deep into your bones. You stop asking what you want. You stop protecting your own peace. Of course, helping others is a beautiful thing, it's part of living a virtuous life. But Stoicism teaches balance. It teaches that we must act from wisdom, not from fear or guilt. And wisdom sometimes means preserving your own strength so that when you do choose to give, you give from a place of fullness, not exhaustion. If this sounds familiar, try this: the next time someone asks something of you, pause just for a moment before you answer. Ask yourself, do I truly want to do this? Does this align with my values and priorities right now? If the honest answer is no, practice saying it kindly but firmly: I'm sorry, I can't commit to that right now, or that won't work for me, but I hope it goes well. At first, it might feel uncomfortable. If you've spent years saying yes automatically, your mind will push back, and so might some people around you, especially those who have benefited from your constant availability. But with time, you'll notice something: your yes will start to mean more. Because when you do say yes, it will come from choice, not obligation. When I began practicing this, I found I had more energy for the things I actually cared about. I was more present with friends and family. I even felt lighter because I wasn't carrying the quiet resentment that comes from saying yes when my heart was screaming no. Remember, protecting your time and energy isn't about shutting the world out. It's about making sure you have enough of yourself left to give generously when it truly matters. And that brings us to the next lesson, because sometimes, even when we do achieve something meaningful for ourselves, we have another habit that keeps us small. We downplay our achievements, as if recognizing our own effort would make us arrogant. In truth, acknowledging what you've done well is one of the most stoic acts of self-respect there is. For you downplay your achievements. In the last lesson, we talked about the quiet damage that comes from saying yes when you really mean no, but even when you do honor your own boundaries and achieve something meaningful, there's another subtle habit that can chip away at your self-worth: the habit of downplaying your own achievements. I've seen it in myself more times than I can count. A colleague once congratulated me on a big project I had led at work. It had taken months of late nights, hard decisions, and solving problems no one else wanted to touch. And what did I say? Oh, it was nothing, anyone could have done it. But that wasn't true. It wasn't nothing. It was hours of focus, the courage to take responsibility, and the discipline to see it through when it would have been easier to give up. By brushing it off, I wasn't being humble, I was erasing the evidence of my own effort. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." He didn't mean we should boast or seek applause, but he did mean we should live our virtues fully, and that includes recognizing them when we've acted with courage, discipline, justice, or wisdom. When you downplay your achievements, you send a quiet message to yourself: what I do isn't worth much. And over time, that belief can shape the way others see you too. If you don't value your contributions, why would they? I understand why we do it. Many of us, especially after 40, were raised to avoid bragging. We were taught to work hard in silence, to let others notice if they wanted to. But here's the thing: life isn't a classroom where the teacher automatically calls on you when you've done something well. If you never acknowledge your own efforts, you risk becoming invisible, even to yourself. Recognizing your achievements isn't about feeding your ego. It's about telling yourself the truth. If you worked hard for something, if you showed discipline, creativity, or perseverance, it's worth saying, even if only to yourself, "I'm proud of that." One simple practice that changed my perspective was this: at the end of each week, I write down 3 things I accomplished, big or small. It could be finishing a tough project, having a difficult conversation with kindness, or even sticking to my exercise routine. Then I take a moment to notice the virtues each one required. Maybe it was patience. Maybe courage. Maybe resilience. This reflection helps you see the connection between your achievements and the Stoic virtues. It turns "I just got lucky" into "I showed wisdom and discipline." And over time, it strengthens your sense of self-worth without inflating your ego. The next time someone gives you a compliment, try this: resist the urge to deflect it. Instead, simply say, "Thank you. I worked hard for it." Not to boast, but to acknowledge the truth. Because when you honor your own efforts, you set a quiet example for others to do the same. And that leads us to the next lesson, because while acknowledging your own worth is essential, sometimes the environments we choose to stay in slowly erode that self-worth, no matter how strong it is. In the next lesson, we'll talk about the hidden cost of staying in environments that drain you and why walking away can be one of the most powerful Stoic acts you'll ever make. 5. You stay in environments that drain you. In the last lesson, we talked about the quiet danger of downplaying your own achievements, how it slowly makes you invisible, even to yourself. But sometimes, the problem isn't just inside us, it's around us. And one of the most common ways people undervalue themselves is by staying in environments that drain their energy, their joy, and their hope. I once worked in an office where the air felt heavy every morning. Not because of the work itself, but because of the constant complaining, the subtle gossip, and the unspoken rule that no one should try too hard or stand out too much. I told myself I could handle it, that I was tough enough to not let it get to me. But after months of that atmosphere, I noticed I was coming home more exhausted, snapping at my family, and losing interest in the things I loved. The environment was changing me, and not for the better. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." I believe the same is true about the places and people we surround ourselves with. If you spend enough time in a place filled with negativity, it begins to seep into your thoughts, your habits, and your self-image. When you undervalue yourself, you tell yourself it's not worth the trouble to leave. You convince yourself that this is just how things are, or that your needs aren't important enough to seek something better. But here's the truth: staying in a toxic environment out of fear or habit is like staying in a room filled with smoke. Even if you can breathe for now, it's slowly poisoning you. The Stoics believed in building an inner citadel, a fortress of the mind that protects your peace no matter what happens outside. But they also believed in living in accordance with nature, and part of that is seeking environments that allow you to grow, to live virtuously, and to contribute meaningfully. Leaving doesn't always mean quitting your job tomorrow or moving across the country. Sometimes, it starts with small boundaries, spending less time with draining people, limiting exposure to constant negativity, or carving out spaces in your day that nourish you. Other times, it means making a plan, finding a healthier workplace, or surrounding yourself with people who lift you up. One of the hardest truths I had to face was this: you don't have to stay where you are simply because you've been there a long time. Time invested doesn't always mean it's worth more. Sometimes, it just means you've been stuck longer. When you choose to leave a draining environment, you're not running away. You're walking toward a place where you can live your values without constant resistance. And that decision alone is a powerful act of self-respect. As we move into the next lesson, remember this: the people and places around you shape you, but they do not define you. You have the right and the responsibility to choose where you place your energy. And that brings us to the next way we undervalue ourselves: by constantly putting everyone else's needs before our own, until there's nothing left for us. In the next lesson, we'll explore why self-care is not selfish and how caring for yourself first is one of the most generous things you can do for others. 6. You put everyone else's needs first. In the last lesson, we talked about the silent damage of staying in environments that drain you, how they slowly erode your spirit until you barely recognize yourself. But sometimes, the draining doesn't just come from where you are, it comes from what you give away. And one of the most common ways people undervalue themselves is by putting everyone else's needs ahead of their own every time, without question. I know this pattern well. For years, I prided myself on being the dependable one. The person who would say yes when no one else would. The friend who would answer the phone at midnight, the family member who would drop everything to help. And in many ways, that felt noble, like I was living the Stoic virtue of justice, doing my duty to others. But here's what I didn't realize: you cannot pour from an empty cup. The more I ignored my own needs, the more tired, resentful, and disconnected I became. I was showing up for others, but not as my best self. Stoicism teaches us the importance of serving others, but it also teaches self-discipline and wisdom, knowing when to give, and when to replenish. Because if your body is exhausted, if your mind is clouded, if your spirit is worn down, your ability to truly help is compromised. I remember one Sunday afternoon when my sister called. She needed help organizing her garage before winter. I had been looking forward to a quiet day, reading, cooking, maybe taking a long walk. But without thinking, I said yes. I spent hours lifting boxes, sorting tools, and by the time I got home, my back hurt and my mood was heavy. I wasn't resentful toward her, but I was disappointed in myself. Not because I helped, but because I didn't pause to ask, do I have the energy for this today? Can I give without depleting myself completely? The Stoic principle of the dichotomy of control reminds us, our actions are within our control, but the actions and well-being of others are not. We can't fix everyone's problems, and it's not our duty to destroy our own health trying. Self-care is not selfish, it's strategic. It's ensuring you have the strength, clarity, and patience to truly serve others when it matters most. That means sometimes saying, I'd love to help, but I can't today. Can we plan another time? It means blocking out time in your calendar just for you and protecting it as fiercely as you would protect an important meeting. When you start valuing your own needs, something changes. Your yes becomes a gift, not an obligation. You give from abundance, not depletion. And the people who truly love you will respect that. In the next lesson, we'll look at a different form of self-neglect, one that isn't about what you give away, but about what you hold back, the fear of making decisions. Because undervaluing yourself doesn't just show in what you do for others, it shows in how much trust you have in your own judgment. 7. You fear making decisions. In the last lesson, we talked about the cost of putting everyone else's needs before your own, how it leaves you depleted, even when your intentions are good. But sometimes, undervaluing yourself isn't about overgiving to others. Sometimes, it shows in how much you hold back from yourself, especially when it's time to make a decision. Have you ever stood at a crossroads, whether in your career, your relationships, or even in a simple daily choice, and felt paralyzed? You go back and forth, weighing every possible outcome, imagining every way it could go wrong, until so much time passes that the choice is made for you. I've been there. A few years ago, I had an opportunity to take a new position at work. It would have meant more responsibility, a higher salary, and the chance to work on projects I cared about deeply. But it also meant stepping into the unknown. What if I failed? What if I wasn't as capable as they thought? I delayed giving an answer for so long that the offer was eventually withdrawn. And the truth was, I had said no without ever saying the word. Stoicism teaches that we cannot control outcomes, only our actions, our intentions, and our judgments. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. When you fear making decisions, you're often trying to control what cannot be controlled, guaranteeing a perfect result before you even take the first step. But the Stoics saw decisions differently. They believed that if your choice is guided by wisdom, integrity, and alignment with your values, then the outcome, whether success or failure, is simply part of life's natural flow. A poor outcome isn't proof you were wrong, it's proof you had the courage to act. When you undervalue yourself, you doubt your ability to handle whatever comes after you decide. So you hesitate, you overthink, and you wait for certainty, a certainty that never arrives. And the cost isn't just missed opportunities, it's the slow erosion of trust in yourself. One practice that helped me is something I call the Stoic 3. Before making a decision, I ask myself 3 questions. Does this align with my values? Am I acting with integrity? Can I accept the outcome, whatever it may be? If the answer is yes to all 3, I take the step. Because the longer you wait for a perfect guarantee, the more life will pass you by. And here's something I've learned: decisions are like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they get. You start to trust your own judgment, and that trust builds your sense of self-worth in ways nothing else can. As we move into the next lesson, remember this: fear of deciding is really fear of living. And if we're not careful, that fear can turn into another habit that robs us of peace, the habit of constantly comparing our lives to others, measuring our worth against someone else's story. 8. You compare your life to others. In the last lesson, we talked about the fear of making decisions, how it can quietly keep you stuck, watching life happen instead of living it. But there's another habit that can paralyze us just as much, one that steals joy not only from our choices, but from our everyday life. It's the habit of comparing your life to someone else's. It's easier than ever to fall into this trap. We carry little windows in our pockets, phones that show us the best moments of everyone else's life, 24 hours a day. Vacations in Italy. Smiling family photos. New cars, new homes, new promotions. And it's so easy to look at those snapshots and think, why don't I have that, or I must have done something wrong. I remember scrolling through social media one evening, seeing an old college friend post about his retirement at 55. He looked happy, relaxed, surrounded by his family in a beautiful home by the beach. I was happy for him, at least, that's what I told myself. But deep down, I felt a twist of envy. I started thinking about every choice I had made, wondering if I'd taken the wrong path. And for the rest of the night, the things I did have, the life I had built, felt somehow smaller, less important. The Stoics warned us about this. Epictetus said, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid in regard to external things. He meant that we should not measure ourselves by possessions, achievements, or the opinions of others, but by our own virtues and our own progress. The truth is, you never see the whole picture of someone else's life. You see the highlight reel, not the behind the scenes. You don't see the arguments behind the smiling family photo, the debt behind the new car, or the personal struggles hidden behind the perfect vacation. When you undervalue yourself, you use someone else's yardstick to measure your own worth. But that yardstick was never meant for you. Your path, your challenges, your growth are uniquely yours. One practice that helped me break this habit was gratitude. Every morning, before I look at my phone, I write down 3 things I'm grateful for, not grand achievements, just real, present moments. A good cup of coffee. The way the morning light falls through my kitchen window. A conversation with my daughter that made me laugh. It reminds me that my life, as it is, holds beauty and value. Another Stoic practice is to admire others without envy. If someone achieves something, let it inspire you rather than diminish you. Ask, what virtues did they show to get there? Can I practice those in my own way? That turns comparison into motivation, and keeps your focus on what's within your control, your own actions and character. As we move to the next lesson, remember this: your worth isn't determined by how your life looks compared to someone else's. It's determined by how you live according to your values, and how you grow from the circumstances that are uniquely yours. And speaking of growth, in the next lesson we'll talk about a habit that can slowly stop your growth without you even noticing: neglecting your own personal development, as if investing in yourself were somehow not worth the effort. 9. You neglect your own growth. In the last lesson, we talked about the trap of comparing your life to others, how it can rob you of joy and distract you from your own path. But sometimes, the problem isn't that we're watching someone else's journey, it's that we've stopped moving forward on our own. And one of the clearest signs you may be undervaluing yourself is when you neglect your own growth. I've seen this happen quietly, almost invisibly. Life gets busy, the demands of work, family, and routine fill every hour. Before you know it, weeks or months have passed since you last learned something new, tried a different challenge, or did anything just for the sake of expanding your mind and spirit. I remember a period in my late 40s when I felt stuck. Not unhappy, exactly, just flat. I was doing the same things, seeing the same people, and thinking the same thoughts, day after day. One afternoon, I saw an old guitar in the corner of a thrift shop. I had always wanted to learn to play, but immediately, my mind said, "You're too old for that. It's too late." I walked away without buying it, and I carried a quiet regret for weeks. That's what neglecting your growth feels like. It's telling yourself you're too busy, too tired, or too old, when deep down, you're just afraid to invest in yourself. Seneca once wrote, "As long as you live, keep learning how to live." The Stoics saw personal growth not as a luxury, but as a duty, because developing your mind, your skills, and your character makes you better equipped to live a virtuous and meaningful life. When you undervalue yourself, you convince yourself that your growth can wait until someday. But the truth is, there is no someday. The opportunities you pass by now are the seeds of the life you'll have later. Growth doesn't have to be dramatic. It could mean reading a book that challenges your thinking, taking a class in a skill you've always been curious about, joining a group that shares an interest you've put aside for years. Even small steps, a daily journal entry, a new walking route, a conversation with someone from a different background, can expand your world. The Stoic way is to treat personal growth as an ongoing practice. Not something you cram into the spare corners of your life, but something you deliberately choose. Because when you invest in yourself, you're sending a powerful message to your own mind: I am worth the effort. I am worth the time. And here's the beautiful part: growth fuels self-worth, and self-worth fuels the courage to keep growing. It becomes a cycle that lifts you higher each time. In the next lesson, we'll talk about one of the biggest blocks to that cycle: depending too much on other people to tell you you're enough. Because undervaluing yourself isn't always about what you don't do. Sometimes, it's about seeking constant external validation instead of trusting your own inner compass. 10. You seek constant external validation. In the last lesson, we talked about the danger of neglecting your own growth, how it quietly tells your mind you're not worth investing in. But there's another habit that can be just as damaging, and it runs even deeper into the way we see ourselves. It's the habit of constantly looking outside yourself for proof that you're enough. I used to live for praise without even realizing it. At work, I'd check my email hoping for words like "great job." On social media, I'd refresh the page, counting likes and comments. In conversations, I'd scan people's faces for signs of approval. And if it wasn't there, if they didn't smile, respond quickly, or say something kind, I'd feel a quiet emptiness, as if my worth had just dropped a little. It's exhausting, isn't it? Because when you tie your self-worth to other people's approval, you're living on a leash you can't see, one that pulls tighter every time someone doesn't notice you, or doesn't respond the way you hoped. The Stoics warned against this kind of dependence. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It never ceases to amaze me, we all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." To the Stoics, true freedom comes from living in alignment with your own values, not from chasing the ever-changing judgments of others. When you undervalue yourself, you rely on others to hand you a sense of worth instead of cultivating it from within. It's like borrowing money every day instead of earning your own. You're always in debt, always waiting, never truly free. I remember one day when this truth hit me hard. I had given a presentation that I thought went well. But afterward, No one said much about it. No compliments, no feedback, nothing. I went home that evening feeling deflated. Then I asked myself, would my work have been any less valuable if no one said a word? The honest answer was no. The value was in the effort, the preparation, and the delivery, things that were entirely within my control. Their silence didn't change that. The Stoic way is to measure yourself by your own inner scoreboard. Did you act with integrity? Did you put in honest effort? Did you align with your values? If the answer is yes, you've already won, even if no one else claps for you. Breaking free from the need for constant validation doesn't happen overnight. Start small. The next time you do something you're proud of, pause and acknowledge it privately before you look for anyone else's reaction. Say to yourself, I did that well. I'm glad I put in the work. Let that be enough. When you stop living for applause, you start living for truth, and that's where real peace begins. And now, having walked through these 10 signs together, it's time to bring all of these lessons into one powerful truth. Your worth is not something you wait for others to give you. It's something you claim, every day, by the way you live. You are not here to be invisible. You are not here to live quietly beneath your potential. You are here to live in alignment with your values, to act with courage, to treat yourself with the same respect you give others. Stop undervaluing yourself. The world doesn't need a quieter, smaller you, it needs the real you, unafraid to live fully. If this message has resonated, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe so we can keep walking this Stoic journey together. If you found these 10 signs eye-opening, you'll want to watch my next video, 12 Stoic Principles to Build Unshakable Self-Respect, where I'll share the ancient practices that turn self-worth into unshakable confidence.